to do something new. I want to do something like recording my reaction to other videos on YouTube and stuff like that. I've been thinking about doing this because I've noticed there's a lot of people that are doing a lot of content on the things that I've been reporting on, the things I've been doing research on over the past 5 years. And it's a lot of content that's already out there. I've been working on my own content over the past 5 years. And I'm just now finding that there's a lot of people already talking, about this stuff. And I kind of want to start doing reactions to a lot of the things, research I've been doing things on. And so you can see my reaction to the videos. And also it's a better way because a lot of people have been talking about this. There's movements that's been started. And a lot of these content creators are getting a lot of people on board with it and stuff like that. And I've been creating my own content because that's been my goal. But I'm like, there's just so much content already out here. People already got platforms around this. And I'm like, maybe I need to, just jump on, with these people and stuff like that, instead of spending all these years trying to make this content and, trying to build this following and stuff. And, because the stuff, that's going on right now, some pretty serious stuff. And, even in my own relationships and stuff, you're starting to see these things a lot more and more now, especially since the new administration has been brought into office, Trump and everything they doing. We're starting to see, a lot more of this stuff, like the whole thing with this leftist ideologies and the leftist policies and stuff like that. A lot of that shit's been flying under the radar for a very long time, for decades. And people are just now starting to see, you're getting a spotlight is starting to be shined on that, and we're just now starting to see, how jacked up their policies been, how their ideology is, and people are starting to wake up to that. It's the whole thing with the black fatigue. That's actually what's fueling the black fatigue, because people are starting to get tired of black people's behavior, because of a lot of the lies of the left and shit like that. They've been having people have this victim mentality, and I myself have been a victim of that, and growing up, when I was younger and stuff, I wanted to be a scientist. And my plan was to get get my degrees in multiple forms of engineering, then go and get a master's in a specific field, and then go and get a PhD. And I was planning on going all the way up to a doctorate. And back when I was doing all this stuff in school and stuff like this, I was under that program, oh, you black, you can't do it, you don't have people backing you and all this kind of stuff, and I fell for that stupid shit, and now I am where I am today, and I'm like, I lost so much time, because I thought that shit was true. And, once I become older and mature, start to discern, and I start to see, that's just bullshit. And it's like all the shit that people are going through today, it's just all bullshit. Like even the shit with the feminist movement, feminist movement was always bullshit. And the reason why they allowed the feminist movement in the past is because, it was all these husbands and they just wanted to support their wives, it made the women happy. And so that's the reason why they let it, happen. But even in their time, there was people against it. Even women were against it, like this is going to lead humanity down the wrong path, and this is what we're dealing with today. This is the things that we're dealing with right now with the inflation. Everything is a result of it. I mean, you can draw conclusions, you can draw parallels, you can draw it all leads back to feminism and also these leftist ideologies and things like that. It's like the earth and everything in it has an order that it follows, and once you transgress that order, once you step out of order, there's nothing but dysfunction and chaos. And that's what we're living in. It's the whole thing with science too, like where you started embracing science, after the church fell, remember the church, the Roman church used to be like over the world, and like everything the church said went. And so you couldn't question the church or nothing like that. Well, after the church fell due to most of what we consider, the forefathers of science, because those were the people who challenged the church, and they got people on their side. And that's what got people to stop trusting in the church and actually overthrew the church over that. And so, like with the witch hunts and stuff like that, women with makeup and doing all these things that we do today, that we, that weren't normal back then. People had a certain look to them, and so they had makeup. They have all these different sciences and all these different things, the creation of foundations and all this kind of stuff. And these women look very different, and it's like, oh, that's witchcraft, and people, a lot of these witches started embracing science. They started embracing alchemy, which is basically a form of chemistry. And so that's a part of science. And so they started embracing that stuff. The church started to persecute people, against that stuff. And these fathers of science got people on their side, just like the witches, of the women that they were calling witches back then. And so that's how they overthrew the church. Well, that's what happened. So once the church fell, well, the scientists became like the modern day priests, just like the church was. And so now science is just like the church. We don't question science. Whatever science says goes, and that's the mindset we live in today. And so now we're living some type of artificial advanced lifestyle, and we are neglecting the natural things that occur. And we're using artificial or all these things to try and stabilize things that are natural. But people don't understand, like, you can't stabilize nature because nature has an order to it. You can't do anything. It's the same thing with health. You can't do anything to improve the body's health, but doing what the body naturally does. You see what I'm saying? Just doing what the body naturally does. The body produces health on its own. There's nothing you can do other than doing what you're supposed to do. Giving the body nutrients. The body itself provides the health. But we are taught, we can take medications and do all this stuff, and that gives us health. That's not true. And so we can't question science and stuff like that. And so that's what people are doing today. It's like the whole thing with the flat earth movement. They're trying to demonize people because they're going against science. I've studied science my whole life. Engineering, all forms of science. And I went through I was skeptical about the flat earth, when I first got into it. And I used science to try and debunk the flat earth, and I couldn't debunk it, And then what it did was put me into a state of research. When I started researching all the things I believed about science, and I actually started going back, looking for a lot of the proofs of why we believe certain things that we believe in science. And I started to see that there's no proofs, And so this whole time, it's just like the mass consensus effect, right? If everybody believes something, everybody's taught something, everybody believes it, just becomes law, even though it might be wrong. You see what I'm saying? And so there's a lot of things like that in society that's going on today. Even when it comes down to behavior and alternative ways that we're living, it's the whole thing with women today. They've embraced this feminist movement, and what the feminist movement actually did was create women who became men. So these women look like women. They talk like women sometimes. But their spirit, the way they carry themselves, the way they think, they're like men. Their behavior is like men. You see what I'm saying? So these new age women or these modern women are not agreeable. They're arguing with you. They want to be controlling. They believe that they're owed something. They want to be worshipped. They think they're on the same footing as men, and that they deserve respect the same way like a man when they're not the same creature. You see what I'm saying? Men and women are very different. They're saying we want the same opportunities. We want to do the same thing men can do. But when they have that opportunity, they don't do the things men can do because they're not fit for it. You see what I'm saying? And so even today, the feminist movement, they have completed everything they wanted to do, but women are still fucking complaining. You see what I'm saying? Because the movement was bullshit to begin with. And so you have the flood of the workforce. The labor market is flooded with women. And so now every household can't afford to live. Every household can't afford to live, on their own. And so that's why you have multiple people per household and stuff like that. And have multiple people in every household has to work and stuff like that. It's because the labor market is just flooded, with all these women and stuff like that. And so even if a woman was to find like a husband to provide for her, it's like they can't make it because the way the market is, the man would literally have to go for a higher paying job, a career, in order to support his family. You see what I'm saying? Like that. And the way things are going, it's not possible anymore. It's going to be a struggle for most people, because you have to work in order to pay bills. The rent, the real estate market is out of control. Everything's out of control. Utilities, everything is out of whack. Everything is too high. People can't even afford mortgages anymore. And these are people making $200,000 a year, and they can barely even make it anymore. So if we, and that's like a little bit above middle class and stuff like that. People making $200,000, $300,000 a year. If they can't do it, people who making less than that ain't doing too well. And that's why multiple people in the household have to work in order just to make it. And it's because of all this feminist shit, That's what I'm talking about. There's many things that go into it, but once you start to peel back all the layers, you're going to see that it all is based on this idea of the feminist movement. That's what a lot of this stuff is, and that's where it comes from, and it's all these things that have been put in place, even all the tolerances and all the inclusion of all these different things, the DEI and all those things are based off of that. A lot of policies have been written and been put in place because of that, and that's why I like the new administration that came in, because he's starting to remove those things, just like food stamps or TANF and all these different programs, welfare, housing, Section 8, all these things were put in place for women and children, to better women and children. Like in the 1960s and stuff like that, the women went after welfare, especially in the black community. They went after the welfare and they left their men because they could get assistance as long as there wasn't a man in the house. And ever since then, they've been empowering. So we, on the black community, we have that. And we have the feminist movement, which was empowering women to be independent. Empowering women to stand on the same footing as men and claim that they deserve the same respect as men, claim to be like men and everything like that. And so they have years of that type of programming, you know what I mean? And so now these women are leading relationships, being head of households and having all this power, having all this stuff over men. And so now, women were complaining, talking about that they were the lower class, that they were being walked on and had no rights and this and that. But now we live in a time where it's the complete opposite. Now men are in that position. Their cry was never never an authentic cry to begin with. Because the women who started the feminist movement were single women. And they were mad because men wouldn't marry them because they were unattractive. And they didn't have they didn't have the ability to vote because they didn't have husbands, because men didn't want them. And so they are the ones who started the feminist movement. And women, the natural women or the traditional women that were, following the movement, they agreed with them because women are naturally agreeable. You see what I mean? And they just followed those women in their cause. And that's the reason why many of the husbands of these wives allowed the feminist movement, because they thought it would make their wives happy. Because women didn't have a thing at that point. They were just housewives and happy, doing what they do. And then they were proposed, hey, let us go to work. Let us have these rights that you had and stuff like that. And he was like, yeah, that's fine, it'll make you happy, and that was the whole mindset behind it. And so, after time, we've got policies put in place, that reinforces a lot of the goals of the feminist movement. And that's what we're dealing with today, and so Trump's coming in, the new establishment, the new framework, and they're starting to remove those things. And now people are starting to see, that, sorry about that. Sorry about that important text after text. And so, yeah, people are starting to see that, right? We're starting to identify, those things, that that's been wrong in society and stuff like that. And we're starting to peel back those layers, and we're starting to take a peek inside, and so a lot of these things are starting to be exposed and stuff like that. And sorry about that. I'm at a park right now. It's just a lot of stuff going on, but yeah, though. So he's starting to remove those things, and we're starting to see, and it's going to be hard for black women, especially because black women are the ones, who've been targeted from a lot of these things. Even like when we talk about Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood, that goes all the way back to eugenics and stuff like that. And black women were the main target, and they were the ones affected by the campaign and stuff like that. Even to this day, it's still black women, who fall for that stuff, just like I was talking about in a video before, it's like black women are mostly the women, who are out here not having children and stuff like that. They are more likely to have their tubes tied. They're more likely to do that, and they can have all these excuses. Even my own wife did that, against my judgment and stuff like that, and these women, they are not taught to be women. They're not taught to be wives and stuff like that. They're taught to be independent. They want to make the rules. They want to make demands and stuff like that. And that's not naturally how relationships work. And that's the reason why the divorce rate and, relationship failure rates are so high today. It's because women don't act like women anymore. There's still women out here being taught to be women, and those women are finding husbands, but it's the ones that are not. They're being taught to, go get your career, be independent. Well, women don't understand that we're not looking for women with a career. We're not looking for that because that's not feminine. We want a woman that's feminine. When you're independent, that goes against the nature of a woman. A woman is not made to be independent. She's made to be interdependent, to rely on her husband. That's why women submit to the husband. It's even seen in the animal kingdom with the lion and his lionesses. They submit unto him and look for provision from him, and when the lion is sometimes tired and can't go out and get food, the women come together and go get food, and he's the first one to eat out of respect for the male. That's how even human relationships work and stuff like that. And even nature, shows that. And that's what we're doing today. We are living unnatural lifestyles or artificial lifestyles, and we're expecting a natural result. You see what I'm saying? You can't have a natural result if you're living an alternative lifestyle, or if you're living an advanced lifestyle. You're not going to have a natural result. It's like trying to water flowers with Gatorade, and you're trying to figure out why the plants aren't growing. It's because all the additives in the water, they're killing the plants. You can't water plants with Gatorade. You have to use what's naturally the natural water source, which is just water. You see what I'm saying? And that's what we're doing in relationships today. But anyways, yeah, that's why I want to, just go in here and start to do some reaction to a lot of the videos, because everybody's already talking about this. I'm kind of coming in late. I've been new about this stuff. I've been studying, actually, when it comes to roles of men and women, I've been studying this, I'd say, since I was 15. And at 12, 13, I had to take on a more mature role in my life, and so, ever since then, I didn't have a childhood ever since around 13, 14, around that area, 12 to 14, because I had to step up, and become very more mature for my age and stuff like that. I take care of my mom, my brother and stuff like that, and at that time, my father wasn't in my life and stuff like that, and so I had to learn everything through pure intelligence. That's what drove me. I wanted to be a scientist. I studied on science, physics, all these things. I became very mechanically, technically, and intellectually minded, and so I became an observer, and so I would observe people's lives. I would observe men around me. I'd see their failures, and I avoid the things that they did. I see men who around me were successful, and I would do what they did to become successful. So, then also I had another ability because I had to mature at a young age. I started to be in touch with my subconscious mind, and I learned a lot about the subconscious that, and even to this day, most people don't know anything about the subconscious. And I don't even think there is any field of science that actually studies the subconscious. I hear like psychologists mention things here and there, but they don't really talk about the subconscious either. And so the only people who really talk about the subconscious are spiritualists, and they take a spiritual approach to it, but it's not spiritual. It's just like it's actual more natural mind. It can literally be metered, it can be tracked, it can be observed by science, but nobody does it. And it's like and so that's how I learned a lot of things too. Like not having a father, there was things that came up, and I can hear like my subconscious speaking to me. It's the same thing. Like I can understand certain things. Like when people are angry, I understand how people get angry. I know why people cry when they get hurt, because I heard the subconscious mind. There's a time when I got hurt, and I'd hear this little voice in the back of my head, like, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve to be hurt like this. What did I do to deserve this? You can hear those little voices in your head. That's what triggers people to start crying when you're hurt. It's not the physical pain, it's the emotional toll of the voices in your head. You don't even be thinking about it. You hear it. That's one of the things of being in touch with the subconscious mind. So I know trauma, and I know how trauma is installed. You see what I'm saying? So I know when people go through things like abandonment, that it will create these conditions in their life, and they do certain things. They create phobias. They create mental disorders like bipolar and all these different kind of things, schizophrenia, based on things that happen, because that's the way the subconscious mind install these things as traumas to protect itself from these things happening in the future or happening again. You know what I mean? That's why a lot of people get schizophrenia. Schizophrenia, bipolar, all those things are triggered by sexual trauma or abandonment issues when you're young and stuff like that. And then there's also you have other traits, like if you don't have a female doesn't have a father to teach her, like, this is what a man is, expect this. That woman will grow up thinking she knows what a man is. And that's where another thing where we are today in relationships. Women think they know what men are, they think they know what men are, and you hear it all the time. We watch stuff like Kevin Samuels, and you have all these women coming on there. I want a man to intellectually challenge me. I want to sit around and talk about. Men don't do that. You know what I mean? And so when a woman is in a relationship and she's expecting that, and she gets a man, that's quiet, don't really talk much, don't express himself, or he's just a man. But in her mind, she has these ideas of what she think a man is. And so she will fall back in a relationship, start doing less. The man's not really noticing her anymore because she's not, putting herself out there. She's not making him want her, knowing that, a man is usually tired. A man has all these different responsibilities, even outside of her, to make sure that the family's protected, provided for, and all these things. And so she stops doing that, and then she starts complaining, talking about, I'm being neglected in a relationship. He doesn't love me. He doesn't compliment. He doesn't do this. Well, he's not doing that because you're not being noticeable. You have to make a man notice you, because, a man is not a woman, and you are thinking from a woman's perspective. You see what I'm saying? And that's what's destroying a lot of relationships today, is because they're not being taught. The older generations understood this. Young women who are being taught to be wives by their mother and father, they understand this type of stuff. That's why women who are more feminine, women who are taught to be women and stuff, they usually cater to their man. They do everything. They want to do it. They're happy to do it. And then they get that appreciation. They get that satisfaction. They get that love from the man, and that fuels them. It's like filling up on love and stuff like that. And so that's what it's like. It's like you gotta, there's work involved. But these women today, they don't want to work. They're just lazy. They think that somebody owes them something. They think that this man is supposed to worship them. And they don't understand that, no, men are not made to worship you. We're not made to please women. If anything, we are there to provide for you, protect you, and care for you in ways like that. You know, we're the leaders. We're making the hard decisions, you know, the logical decisions, you know, to make the path of the family, you know, to move to the future in a positive manner. That's what we're there to do. You know, we're not there to please the woman. You know, the woman is not there to please the man. She's there, you know, to take care of the children, make sure the house is good, to do all the things that keeps the family moving forward. That's what the woman is. She's the glue that holds the family together, the bond, you know. And it's the same thing with women in the society. You know, that's the reason why communities are falling apart, because women abandoned that role. The women were the ones in the city council. The women were the ones, you know, cleaning up the neighborhoods, the parks, and making sure everything ran good, you know, because the women were out there with their kids, you know, during the day. You know, when they get out of school, playing at the parks or with the young kids, you know, so they would see everything going on in the neighborhood, and they would go to all the council meetings and say, hey, this is what's going on. We need to do this. We need to do that. You know, and so the women were the ones who were keeping the communities, you know, in check and stuff like that. But when they abandoned that, and so that now they're independent. You know, they outwork and they doing everything men are doing now. So now they're men, right? And so the children are abandoned. They hand the children over to the state or to public schools to be taught, handing them over to social media. They're not teaching anything. They don't barely even see their kids. You know, everybody comes home at the same time, and then we're just, you know, a little bit of family time, go to sleep, and just repeat the cycle over again. They're not teaching the children, you know what I mean? So they abandon their children. They're abandoning their roles, you know, and so that's what we're seeing in society today. We're watching the destruction. We're watching the fallout of all that. And it's like, you know, that's the destruction of the relationships and stuff like that. You know, that's why I like watching stuff like Kevin Samuels, because he brings stuff up that people don't really think about. You know what I mean? People don't think about the things that he talks about. And so, you know, there's a lot of things, like even in the black community, we're not taught, you know, even half the stuff that normal people are taught, and even white people or all other ethnic groups, they're not taught finances in school either. And so it requires somebody to teach you that stuff. You know, that's the role of the parents. Everybody keep trying to put stuff on the school system. It's not the school's just system to teach your children. You know what I mean? It's the parents' job to teach their children. You know what I mean? And that's what happened. You abandon your child when you do that. And so, yeah, there's lots of things that, like, most people don't think about elder care. That's one thing I never thought about, elder care. You know, that's one of the things I've heard. 401k, all these plans, and you know, and I just thought they were just saving programs, you know, for just saving money, you know, building wealth. No, a lot of stuff is for elder care. You got to think, once you get 65, you're not going to be able to work anymore. You know, you may physically not be able to work. There's nothing you can do. How are you going to provide for yourself? How are you going to provide for your kids if you have them? You can't work. You see what I mean? It's like, and like, even if you are working a job, up to that point, and you are saving money, think about it. There's a certain amount of money you need to save when you get to that point. So if you're working a job that's only paying you $38,000, $50,000, $60,000, and you got a whole family, you and your wife is not going to have enough for elder care. You see what I mean? You know, there's a lot of things to take in consideration. You got health insurance, life insurance, so many things. You know, in the black community, we don't think about any of that, you know? And it's just mind-blowing that, and I mean, that's the whole issue too that we're dealing with today, you know. So these women getting these relationships, especially in the black community, oh, it's not working out with this man, I don't like this man, you know, he's being a man, but I don't understand what a man is, and so I'm going to leave the relationship. Women throw away a whole relationship. They throw away the prosperity of their children. They throw away the proper development of their children just because of the way they feel. You know what I mean? That's why when the older generation, even though a relationship wasn't working, even though these people were not in love with each other, they would stay together for the children, you know, so that the next generation could have a shot at doing things the right way. Because once you break up that family unit, that's it for those children. There's nothing you can do. It doesn't matter if the mother's still alive. It doesn't matter if the father's still alive. They're not going to have proper development, you know. And so once you break that up, it's over for those kids. You know what I mean? Especially when you're dealing with like a family, you know, with disabled children and stuff like that. It's over. You see what I mean? If somebody moves on, get another family, there's not going to be a lot of resources for that child. You know what I mean? Because this person has a whole nother family you got to provide for. They don't think about any of that kind of stuff. You know, that's what I like about Kevin Samuels. You tell these women, go back to your husband, go back to your father. You know, because these women think they're going to find another relationship when they have all 2, 3 kids. You know, men are not wanting to be signing up to be stepfathers. Nobody wants to be a stepfather to a child. You know, I hate that. I have 2 children. I actually wanted more children, but my wife got her tubes tied, you know, and so that already causing conflict in our relationship, you know. And so now, you know, I got to put up with that. And it's like, you know, think about another man in my position. If I was to leave this relationship and go to a next relationship, I'm going to be happy to be in that relationship because, you know, I'm able to have more children. And you have to think about something like that. If you have 2 children and you're over here trying to find another man, you have to think like in my position. I already have children and I still want more children. So imagine some man who don't have children, you know, and you trying to get him signed up to be a stepfather when he want more children. You can't even have more children. You know what I mean? And also, you already have 2 children that don't even belong to him. And he's got to put up with the baby daddy drama and all the other kind of stuff that comes along with that. He can't discipline those children, especially if they're older. They may resent him. You know, that's too much to sign up for. Remember, relationship, and this is the whole thing. We've taught this Disney love. Like, relationships are only about the man and the woman and their love together. No, that's not what love is. Love is literally commitment. You know, I chose you and I'm going to be with you, and I made that commitment. That's what love is. You know, these things that we add to love and stuff comes from fairy tales, fables, books. You know, all these romance novels and all that kind of stuff. That stuff's not real. That's not real. You know, the infatuation stage, when 2 people are getting to know each other, usually barely goes past 2 years. You see what I mean? And it's only exciting and it's happy because you don't know this person. You know, you happen to be with this person and get to know them. Once that's over with, that's what we call love, infatuation. You know, and so once that ends, you got to fall into your role. And that's what keeps the marriage going for a longer period. Because otherwise, you're just going to fall apart. You know, and so that's what usually happens. You know, these people think they're in love, they get married, and then once the 2-year mark hit, all that goes away. Now these 2 people just live with each other. They figure out like, oh, we can't stand each other. And so they get a divorce. You know? And you just go through your life trying relationships, building up trauma, building up baggage, having kids. And then you get to your 3rd relationship and you over here trying to think you're finna find a man. Nobody wants you. Nobody wants that. You know what I mean? Ain't nobody signing up for that. I'm not going to sign up for that, even if I leave this relationship. I'm not finna go and find somebody with children because I want more children. And I want my own children. I don't want to deal with somebody else's children, with their father in the life and stuff like that. Nobody wants to deal with that. You know what I mean? And so, you know, that's why I like watching Kevin Samuels stuff, because you got all these older ladies, these older black women, you know, these coming on there telling, you know, these younger women that they had that same idea, like, I'm finna leave, you know, because I'm not feeling this way. But that's what people don't understand. It doesn't matter what relationship you go into. You're not going to find that. There is no perfect person for you. There's no love. There's no none of that. You have to make love. You see what I mean? Every relationship is going to start with that infatuation stage, you know, where y'all happy to be with each other, happy to, you know, going on your way to do stuff. Every relationship does that, but it's not going to last. You know what I mean? So every relationship is going to be like that, you know? And so now you got women out here looking for like friendships. Your husband is not your friend. You don't want a husband as a friend. You know what I mean? That's not positive. I don't know, you know, where that mindset comes from. But I've seen it all the time. You know, women talking about, oh, I want my best friend. Your husband's not your best friend. You know, that's stuff that happens like when you're up in age, like in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, when you're old and can't do anything. That's when you want a friend. You can't do anything. You know what I mean? But a relationship is very different when you're younger than that. You know, it takes a lot of work and stuff like that. It takes stuff from both sides. You know, you got to work every single day. It takes work. You can't sit back, you know. And I think the main thing with that is women don't understand what men are today. The modern woman doesn't understand what a man is. And I don't even think a modern woman even know what she is, because of the feminist movement. It kind of changed the role of a woman. They see themselves as something completely different than what they really are. It's like they're equipped to be one thing. And I think that's what's causing a lot of depression in younger women today. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of depression for men is coming because they're trying to make us something we're not. They're trying to make us feminine. They don't like masculinity. They think masculinity is negative and all this kind of stuff. The world worked a lot better with masculinity. The world we in today is nothing but poverty. People can't afford things. Homeless people. The morality of people is horrible. You know what I mean? And look at the morals of people today. People don't even care about people's life. Life means nothing to people these days. They just going out murdering people, just the way they feel. Just a thought pops in their head. I'm going to go murder somebody. Don't even think about the consequences or nothing. That's just how messed up people's mindset is today. And it's because of this type of stuff. That's why we're supposed to enforce things. That's why we were able to whip our children, to enforce correction, to force correction. You can't sit here and talk to people like they're adults. You can't talk to children like they're adults because they can't reason like adults. So why would you do that? All animal, even in the animal kingdoms, they discipline their young by force, even by lions. It's by violence, by attacking them to put them in their place. Just like males, in the animal kingdom, fighting over territory, they fight. And the male who loses submits. That's how that works. And so that's the whole that's what I'm talking about. Policies. Everything around us has been put in place off of this feminist movement. That's why punishments are a lot lighter. That's why everything. You see what's going on in sanctuary cities where they're not persecuting people for crimes because, they don't want to put other people in harm's way. What happened to heroes? There's no more heroes. It's against the law to be a hero in most places now. You know what I mean? Because they're trying to protect people. That's a woman's way of thinking, a nurturer. A pacifier. A caregiver. Those things in society, that's what we're dealing with. Those things nurture negative behavior. And that's why we see children out of control. Because there's no more discipline. Now we want to talk to them. We want to focus on the psychological. Why are people psychologically committing crimes? They're committing crimes because they want to. They're committing crimes because they don't get punished for it. That's why they're committing crimes. It don't have nothing to do with something psychological. If something feels good, they're going to do it. You know what I mean? Same thing with sex. If sex feels good, so we're going to continue to do it. People get addicted to it because it feels good. There ain't nothing psychological about it. It feels fucking good. And that's why we do it. Bunch of foolishness. Yeah, but yeah, so I'm gonna start doing these. This is kind of like an introduction to a lot of stuff I'm gonna be doing. I want to start doing these reaction videos and stuff like that. People call Kevin Samuels, he's hateful, stuff like that. I'm tired of hearing that dumb shit. Anything that, it's like when people see shit, their feelings get in a bunch, and they hear things that's wrong about them, and then they want to say something is wrong. They don't know. That's what I'm talking about. Accountability. People need to be held accountable. Me as a man, I don't walk around blaming people for shit. I mean, not even at a young age. Like, I've never done that, and that happens to me even in my own relationship. Something may happen in the house and it's like, who did this? Who did it? Why does it matter who did it? You know what I mean? You weren't there to see it. You weren't there to correct the behavior. So it doesn't fucking matter. That's logically the answer to that. And it's like, that's the way it is in society. You know, everybody want to blame people for shit, even working on the job. You know, blame people for shit. When I was a lead, dock lead, you know, there may be something spilled, something hanging out of the racks, you know, in the warehouse and stuff like that. I'm not questioning, oh, who did this, who did that. Trying to go around, trying to just worried about who did it, It don't matter who did it. Fix it. You know what I mean? Put it back in place, and that's what I do. That's the way I live my life. If I see something broken, I fix it. Put it in its place. I don't care who did it. If I catch somebody doing it, you know, that's a different story. But if I don't know who did it, it doesn't matter who did it. I'm not going to go around asking who did it, because it doesn't matter. You know, that's just logical. You know, that's what I'm talking about. There's no accountability. You know, that's the problem. No accountability. You know, people need to start being held accountable. You know, I talk mostly about women and stuff like that. There's a lot of men doing stuff out here too, but you have to understand, if we're talking about on average or a whole of a society, you know, the ball is more on the woman's side now. You know, they are the ones who've been protected through all this. You know, and that's why you don't hear our side. You don't hear our side because they try to reject our side. They try to blame men for every fucking thing. That's not the case. Even, oh, men ain't dogs, they cheat. Why is a man cheating? I'm in the same situation right now. Why is a man cheating? You drove a man to cheat. It's not just a man is cheating. Don't nobody decide to be with a woman. Oh, I'm finna cheat on this woman. Nobody does that. A man got with you. He cherished you. He did everything for you. And then something happened. You know? You stopped doing something. Or you changed. Or you're not doing something that he's telling you should be doing. And it's creating conflict. And so he decides, you know, this just ain't worth it. I'm not getting what I want. So let me go over here. That's what's causing don't nobody just cheat. People cheat for a reason. And you know, that's another thing I want to explain. I mean, not explain, but talk about. That's like I've been saying. Women don't know what men are. They got these expectations, and so they're in these relationships. They think they're being neglected because they don't know what a man is. And so they start seeing the relationship as negative, and so they are the ones who leave the relationship. So they go out and cheat and stuff like that, you know, because they don't know, they're not aware, or they're not discerning what's actually going on. And so they are the ones who be going out and cheating and doing all that kind of stuff. Every relationship I've been in, it's been like that, you know. I ain't never cheated on no woman, not at all, not a day in my life. And pretty much, you know, most of the women I've been with, you know, they cheated on me, you know. And now I can understand, like, now since I'm older and can understand what this feminist movement have done to women, I can understand why they did it now. You know what I mean? And the thing that I always got from these women is, oh, you're too good for me, right? I don't deserve you, or I'm not ready for a man like you. Now I understand where they were coming from. They were not taught to be women. And so they're taught through social media. They're taught through the things that they see, right? And so that's what society does. You know, it teaches women these things, that they don't need to settle down with a man because they're young, doing this and that. They're focused on their career. They don't want no husband, right? And so they're just going out having fun and stuff like that, you know, because they worried about their career. They want to go to college, right? They don't want to be bogged down with children. They don't want to be bogged down in a serious relationship because they want options, right? And that's what society tells them. And so that's what they do. And so now, when they meet a man like me, you know, that's mature for his age, family oriented, you know, I know what I want. I'm a man. I know how to provide. And they see me doing these things. They're not ready for that. And so they go out and cheat because they want to have fun. They're not looking for anything serious. You see what I'm saying? And that's what happens. And so when you get a young girl, you know, it's just like me getting with a young girl or something who's not taught to be a woman, and I start doing what I'm doing now, providing for her, caring for her, doing all this kind of stuff, you know, paying the bills, focusing on things that men focus on, not having time to do like little immature boy stuff, You know, like watching videos, watching movies, and doing all that Netflix and chill type stuff. You know, because I got responsibilities even outside of her. She start, you know, seeing that, oh, he don't love me. You know, then she leaves the relationship and goes out and cheat. That's what happens. You know what I mean? And so that's what was going on. You know, I understand that now. That's what that was. You know, and so I should have never been looking for young girls. I should have been looking for older women to begin with. You know, and that's another thing, you know, that people are going to have to start doing, because our parents have failed us. We have not taught us anything. You know, I see it all the time. You know, they don't teach their children nothing. You know, the mother is going off to work, the father's going off to work, the kids are in school being taught God knows what. Then going to daycares, other people's houses and stuff like that. They don't teach the children nothing. And so they just expect the children to grow up, you know, and just figure it out on their own, right? And that's what we see. That's what's going on. You know, that's why I get tired of women supporting other women when they get jobs and stuff like that. Because what's going to happen to the children? You know what I mean? You abandon your children when you start working. Try to find a husband. Try to learn how to be a woman. Try to be submissive. You know, try to be agreeable. You know, try to be silent. You know, stop arguing. Stop trying to make demands and stuff like that. Learn to work on that type of stuff, and you will find a husband. You know? And these women, you know, I want to find a high value man. I want to find a rich man. Rich men want the same thing that, you know, other men want. All men want the same thing. You know, so if you become a woman like that, those men are going to find you. You know what I mean? Because they're looking for those type of women. But if you're doing the stuff you're doing, you know, being around, and that's another thing, like, you have to understand too that women, a lot of these women, they want young dudes. Young dudes don't have any type of maturity to them, you know, and so you're not going to find a good man in maturity. I mean, you can find somebody in school, you know, and you can grow with that person. That's the best place to find a young person, somebody who's educated, right? Who can keep, especially when it comes to men. You know, because we use logic, and once our minds are being molded in college and school and stuff like that, we're able to focus on things. But these men that aren't going to school that's young, no. You don't want to waste your time with them. You ain't going to do nothing but have kids with them. They're going to leave you. They're going to find the next one. You know, they're unstable. They don't have no work ethic. You know, and you don't want nobody like that. You know? If you can find a man who's working, you know, who's been working for years and stuff like that, he might be a good candidate too. You know, because he's been dealing with the responsibility for a long time. You know, and that probably molds his mind into, you know, being a potential husband. But these dudes that ain't doing nothing, these drug dealers and people just running the street, going to bars, no, you don't want that. You do not want that. You know, and the fathers are the ones who's supposed to see those men and say no. So where are your fathers at? Where are these girls' fathers at? You know, if I had a daughter, I know what a man is. I'm a man. You know, I can judge, you know, if this man is going to be right for her. You know, that's why older men say, does he have a job? You ain't just saying, if he has a job, you know, does that not make him a man? It's not just the job. We're focusing on the job because job builds character. It builds responsibility. It builds trust. It builds all these little things you need to be a man. That's why we say, does he have a job? It's not just the fact, does he have money? That's not just the issue. You know, we're focusing on the character, the principles, you know what I mean, that makes a good man. That's why they say stuff like that, you know. It's just not the fact that I didn't have a job when I met my wife, you know, because I didn't need a job. I was only providing for myself. You know, I was living with my mom. They had an income. Now I had a small income on my own, my repair business. You know, so I didn't need an income. I didn't have a family. I didn't have nothing to provide for. You know what I mean? But once I got my family, I stepped up. I went out and got a higher paying job, you know? And so it's not always just about, does he have money? That's not the case. You know, that's what I'm talking about. It's discernment. People don't have discernment. You know, that's what women should be looking for in a husband. You know, it's those type of things, those type of qualities, because that's what's going to make him a good husband. That's what's going to make him able to provide for you. When shit come up, you know, he's not going to crumble, you know? And that's also why masculinity is good. They're trying to tell you that masculinity is bad. Masculinity is not bad. You don't want no man that's breaking down in front of you, because look at that, man. This man's supposed to be providing for you, protecting for you. But what if somebody came in the house with a gun, you know, and this dude crumbles and just throws you right in front of the bullet? You know what I mean? You don't want no man like that. And that's why you gotta have a man that's masculine, you know? That's what masculinity does, you know? That's what boys do. Boys only care about themselves. Men care about their families. You know, that's what men are. Men, you know, we sacrifice. You know, I sacrifice for my family. If it ever came down to that, I'd sacrifice for my wife and my family. You know, because they are that important to me. That's my role, to protect them. It's my role to provide for them. I'm not a boy. You know what I mean? But that's what these women are doing. They get with these little boys and stuff like that. This man hasn't even had any responsibility under his belt. How are you going to be a good husband to you? How can he be a provider for you? He's not. He's only there to have sex with you. You know, he's only there to use you. You know, and once he's done, he's going to move right on to the next one. And he's going to go through that cycle until he starts learning responsibility. You know, that's why you don't get with younger men. And younger women shouldn't get with younger men. And younger men should probably get, younger men need to find older women and stuff like that. And younger women need to find older men. You know what I mean? That's the times we live in. People at a young age aren't trained to be what they should be. The parents are abandoning everybody. Like, nobody taught anybody anything. Like, I had to learn everything I know through pure intelligence. I didn't have a father. You know, I didn't have the trauma of not having a father because I was in contact with my subconscious mind. And so I understand when certain things came up, you know, certain traumas. I didn't go that way. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. You know what I mean? You know, and that's what it takes. But I guess I'm gonna end this here, but thanks for listening. You know, just be looking out for my reaction videos. That's what I'm going to be doing. So we can pay attention to that. Get into those. Like I said, I was trying to build my following, got all my content together, but I'm like, people are already talking about this, and I've got years of content that I need to get in line. I'm like, I'm not wanting to waste my time on that. I just want to jump in, you know, because, you know, and start talking about this. You know what I mean? Especially in the black community. The black community's got it the worst. Out of, you know, all the different ethnic groups around the world, the black community has it bad. You know, we're getting to a time where people are tired of black people's shit. And so they're not putting up with that stuff anymore. You know, and that's what I was telling you, know. Just like a post I just put on earlier on Facebook. You know, what's going on in Chicago. You got all these gang members talking about, oh, Trump, don't come to Chicago. You gonna get it. I'm like, it just goes to show you how ignorant, you know, how self-entitled, prideful, and that these and just delusional, you know, how delusional these young black people really are. You know, it's everything about black community is just ignorant, you know, and it makes people like me look bad. You know, the higher ups in the black community, it makes us look very bad. Like, you know, it's just horrible, man. And now it's getting really bad. You know, white people are very, 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 they're starting to get riled up by the stuff that's going on, you know, and it's going to get bad. You know, I don't want to see no race war or nothing like that, because black people can talk all smash all they want to. You're not coming against no white people, I'll tell you that. I mean, white people are trained, you know, especially white men, like veterans. You don't want to go after, you don't want those problems, I'm telling you. You know, I've seen them, you know. I talk to a lot of these people, you know, and they've tired of that bullshit, you know, and like I'm saying, you know, we got all this leftist bullshit that's got us caught up in this cycle. You know, that shit ruined my life, where I'd probably be a scientist right now if it wasn't for me listening to that stupid shit, you know, making me feel like I'm a victim, like less than, when I had the same opportunity as every white man in America, making me feel like I don't have opportunities, that don't have options. You know, that shit fucked me up, man. That shit pissed me off. They just ruined my life. They took years off my life, man. I could have been a lot more than what I am right now. I had so much more potential. I mean, there's still stuff I can do, but I'm like so far up in age, and there's just things I could have put in place way back then. I could be way better off right now. You know what I mean? And so they just stole that from me, man. And I'm fucking pissed about it. The hell with these freaking idiotic Democrats, man. And this leftist bullshit, this alternative lifestyle, stupid. I'm tired of all of it. I'm tired of this gay shit, this LGBT. I'm just tired of all of it. You know, all this shit is this shit is all disorder. You know, everything's against nature and twisted. You know, women and all of it. Women don't even act like women anymore, man. They like men. You know? It's just a bunch of bullshit. You know, I'm happy that Trump is doing the shit that he's doing. We need to dismantle all this shit. You know, and just start over again. You know? Getting rid of all these programs. You know, you got all these women. They ain't never worked a day in their life. Getting all this assistance and stuff like that. Don't even know what a job is. You know, just sitting back, thinking that that's a standard, right? Thinking that getting assistance, you don't even think about anything. Like, you have to live in housing the rest of your life. They don't even understand they would never own a house. You never do anything that normal people do. You can't. You know what I mean? You're going to be living in housing for the rest of your life. Your natural born life. You know what I mean? You're always going to be in poverty. You know, you're never going to know what it's like to own a house. You're never going to know, you know, what it's like to own a business. You ain't never going to have that. Because you chose to live on poverty. You chose to live on government assistance. All that stuff is just supplemental. It's not made for you to live on it forever. You know? The standard wage. It's like, right now, it's like minimum standard wage. It's like $60,000 a year. You don't make that kind of money on assistance. You know what I mean? Not at all. Not even close. You know, you in poverty. And it's just crazy that people will accept that. You know, women want to do it on their own. Have all these kids, want to leave their husbands, want to leave these people they had children with, and think that some other man is going to take on that responsibility. That's just foolishness. You better stay with your fucking husband. You better stay with the man who you got kids with, especially if he's willing to have you. You know what I mean? Because women, they don't understand. Like, they are not made to work like we do. I love working. I can't see going a day without labor sometimes. I love working. I'm made for that. Women ain't made for that. And think, if she got all these kids, she's probably only making $50,000 a year with all these kids. And especially young kids. Like, you ain't finna get no high-paying job with all those kids. You know, it takes time to get a profession. You got to go to school for years. Like a lawyer or a doctor, that takes 10, 12 years of schooling. How are you going to do that? How are you going to pay for that when you got all these kids, you know, and you don't have no husband, no man? You know what I mean? You can't provide for all those kids. You know what I mean? So you're going to be in poverty for the rest of your life, and you're going to be working for the rest of your life. And when you hit age 60 and can't work no more, you're going to have nothing. You're going to be still in poverty, and you're going to be living on Social Security, probably only getting $800, $900, maybe $1,500 at most a month, which is not enough to cover anything. And food stamps. You're going to be getting all that shit. And you just live a miserable life. You know what I mean? Don't even think about that kind of stuff. It's crazy. When you could have just been with your husband, stayed home, took care of the kids. You ain't got to worry about no daycare costs. You ain't got to worry about that portion of it because you got that covered. You know what I mean? And as soon as the man saw, my job is not paying enough, he could have furthered his education. You got the kids. You know what I mean? You know, even the job I'm working right now, that's what I'm doing. I'm still furthering my education right now. You know, I'm getting set up right now, you know, to go back to school. And I can do that at the job I'm working because I only work at night. I'm only working 6-7 hours a day, you know, because I work local. I drive trucks. you know, and I got plenty of time to sleep and have plenty of time for school and during the day, you know. And right now, the wife has the kids while I'm asleep, you know, and so I don't have to worry about that, you know. And so, if I wasn't in that situation, I wouldn't be able to do that. You see what I mean? It's the same thing with women, you know. Shit, if you want to go to school, you want to do something, you know, once the kids are starting to grow, you can still do that. You know, they got online options, all kinds of stuff. You can do that. But, I mean, trying to do it on your own, good luck. You know, and the way the economy is, and that's why I like that they're doing it now. I don't like the way the economy is and stuff like that. But we are reaping. But the whole reason we're in this mess is due to feminism. Because these women are doing what they're doing. You know what I mean? And so it's like we're going in, we're trying to undo the things that they did to get there. You know, and I like that, you know, because it's going to force these women to have to go find husbands. You know, it's putting them back in their place. You know what I mean? You know, I feel sorry for those women right now who is out there trying to go and get assistance because they're getting rid of all that. You know, so you got a woman out here, she want to leave her husband because she feels she's neglected or she's not doing what she needs to do in a relationship. She's going to probably go out and try to get housing, try to get Section 8, you know, try to get some type of housing or something. And then she's probably going to need food stamps, all that kind of stuff, TANF, whatever. And she's going to get stuck because they're getting rid of that stuff. And so what's going to happen is she's going to have to go to work. She don't have a husband, right? She left her husband. And no other man's going to sign up for that. That's a bad deal. And so she's going to have to go to work just to get TANF, just to get food stamps. She's got to work. And then she's going to have to use, what is that other system called? You know, where they pay for your kids to go to daycare and stuff like that. And if you got a lot of kids, I mean, they're not going to cover all of them. You're going to have to come out of your pocket for something. And so, I mean, that's just a horrible thing. And I mean, you're going to live the rest of your life like that. Like, if you got kids like 2-3 years old, you got a whole nother 16, 17 years of doing that, you know? And then once you up in old age, you still going to have to work because you by yourself. The bills don't stop. You feel me? Like, they just don't get it. They don't understand. And that's the problem with women. That's why a man is supposed to be over you to give you the best advice. Because women they go off of their emotions, how they feel. You can't do that shit. That's not the way the world works. Nobody does things off feelings. When you do stuff off feelings, you make mistakes. And you put yourself in positions and situations that you really didn't even need to be in. You know, that's why women make so much mistakes, because they go off of their feelings. You know? They don't follow logic. And so that's why the man was put over there. Or whatever, and that's what makes us different. You know, men are logical beings. You know, we don't go off our feelings, and so that's why, you know, women feel as though they're being neglected because they think they understand what a man is, but they don't. And so when they start getting treated, the natural treatment of a man, it makes them feel a certain way. You know what I mean? But women who are raised to be women, they know what to do to get what they want from the man. You see what I'm saying? So she's going to be more passive. She's going to be more feminine. She's going to keep the house clean. She's going to do everything she can. She's going to please the man. You know, have sex. She's going to do all those kind of things that the man requires. And he's going to give her back that affection. He's going to give her back that respect that she's deserved. She's going to give her that. And so she's going to be happy. Her tank of love is going to be filled. You see what I mean? And it's a back and forth. You know, she gives to the man, he gives back to her. You know, that's how it works. And so those people, that's what builds happy relationships. You know what I mean? And a lot of these relationships people are in right now, where they have the woman leading the man, what they end up doing with these kind of men is they make them feminine. And so usually you'll see like the women are actually making all the rules in the house. She's doing all the discipline. She's making all the rules. You know, she's handling all the income and doing all that kind of stuff, because we grew up with that. My mom was like that. All the women in my family, I seen that. You know, women were the ones who was running the households and stuff like that. But what they don't understand, they get a man and they think, oh, this man's going to stay around, this man's going to stay around. That's what you think. We're not wired like that. A man will sit in that. That's a lazy man. We call them beta males, lazy men. And so he will sit in that for a while, but eventually he's going to have some other man come up to like, what are you doing? Like, you just sitting back doing nothing? And he's going to start getting his feeling. You know what I mean? And he's going to try and step up, and the woman ain't going to let him. You know what I'm saying? And then their relationship is going to start going bad. You know, he's going to start reminiscing on other relationships, and, you know, and the relationship's going to become unstable, and he's going to leave. You know, and so that's the kind of relationship we see now. And those kind of relationships do last for a while. You see them last sometimes 10, 15 years. But once they start getting up in old and age and stuff, they leave. And that's what we start seeing. You know, because a man is not going to stay in that state, you know. There becomes a time, you know, that's what young boys do. You know, a lot of men, young boys, when they're young, they look for older women that'll take care of them and stuff like that. You know, or they look for girls, you know, just like black dudes. That's why they be running to the white girls, because they know the white girl's gonna take care of them like that. You see this dude linked up, laid back in the passenger side of this white girl's car. That's what they do. You know, he over here lazy, playing video games, out selling drugs and doing all that kind of stuff. You don't have no 9 to 5. You don't have no real job. You know what I mean? Because he just laid up, having sex with this woman, and she's taking care of him. You know. And then when she starts saying, hey, you need to get a job, she gets tired of it. He leaves and goes to the next woman. You see what I'm saying? And he keeps doing that shit until he learns responsibility. You know, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, but anyways, I've talked enough. I started out just giving an introduction to what I'm finna start doing, but thanks for listening, though. Peace.